Greetings, everybody. I know it's been a little while since I posted the last Bob Dylan Bootleg Series live album tier list video, and for those of you, I don't know how many of you are clamoring for them, but for those of you who are, sorry about the wait. I promise it's not just because I've been slacking. I have some other musical projects going on that require a lot of work. I opened for folk singer Lucy Kaplansky at a sold-out show in Connecticut. I played a show of my own in Brooklyn last night with a new band and new arrangements of new songs. You don't stop working, starts. And hey, by the way, if you're interested in following what I'm up to that's not just talking about Bob Dylan ad infinitum ad nauseum, you can follow me on social media or sign up for my newsletter, both of which are linked in the video description. But to the reason that we're all here now. This video will bring us up to date on Bob Dylan's Bootleg series as of April 13th, 2025. And assuming America still exists in another year, we'll probably get another Bootleg series installment, and you know I'll be there to review it when it comes out. A couple other things before we get started. Our next Bob Dylan show is a Bob Dylan birthday bash at Cafe Wah on May 24th. Tickets are live now. They're linked in the video description. Be sure to get them now. This concert is likely to sell out, and you'll want to be there. I'm not quite sure what I'll do after this. I think I'm either going to move on to other artists or rank all of Bob Dylan's songs. If you've got a preference between other artists and all of Bob Dylan's songs, let me know. It's a big project, but I think it'd be fun. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. It goes a long way toward helping me devote a little bit more time and energy to doing this stuff. Okay, let's do it. 19. The Bootleg Series Volume 12, The Cutting Edge 1965 to 1966. This installment essentially comprises outtakes from the artistic peak of Bob Dylan's career. As you can see from the tier list as it currently stands, the complete Basement Tapes is not ranked all that highly. However, I still feel like it's interesting to talk about the complete Basement Tapes in comparison to the complete Cutting Edge, because what you get in the Cutting Edge is Bob Dylan laboring toward his best creative material. The outtakes of the complete Basement Tapes are kind of just Bob Dylan partying with his bros. I'm sure the boys were having a blast, but outside of knowing what's on Bob Dylan's party playlist, it's not that historically fascinating. The Cutting Edge is a little bit more like watching the Get Back documentary, the Beatles' Let It Be documentary. It's fascinating to watch these arrangements sort of bake in the oven, if you know what I mean. Dylan comes into the studio with songs, but not necessarily with an idea of exactly how he wants to present them instrumentally. And then there's this sort of semi-chaotic, quick but not instantaneous, gesturing of him and the musicians toward what they think the correct arrangement and presentation ought to be. And for this material, that's just a fascinating process. Like, on the one hand, it almost seems impossible to stage a song like a Rolling Stone. In the context of pop music back then, it was so unusual. It was so long. The imagery was so strange. The structure was sort of nothing like anything else on the radio at that point. I can imagine that if I were a studio musician in that session, I'd be like, what do we even do with this? Other than sort of try to just grab onto Bob and hang on for dear life, And that's essentially what that session sounds like. They released the vast majority of, if not the entire Like a Rolling Stone session on this one, and it's fascinating to listen to. Likewise, it's fascinating to listen to how lyrics from the song California get grafted onto Outlaw Blues or get grafted onto Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues. It's fascinating to hear Bob maddened by the drum part that was initially on Mr. Tambourine Man and that they had to take out. He says something like it's exploding my mind, or some very 65 Bob-ism like that. This feels like what it would have been like to be in the studio watching Picasso paint Guernica. Cogitating, gestating, envisioning, and finally executing consummate work. As much as I love the Basement Tapes, that's not what the Basement Tapes complete sounds like. It's just not. Again, it's quite long. It's 6 CDs worth of music. We're at the sort of Kilimanjaro of Dylan material. Like, if you're climbing this mountain, you're really committed to being a Dylan mountain climber. So, I mean, if you're that kind of person, you're still here watching that and listening to these albums, take a weekend and give yourself the time, if you're on a long car trip, or for example, if you're going to go hiking or something, or if you're just sitting around the house trying to really absorb some fascinating artistic documents, do this. Give this the time it deserves. As for the best of the cutting edge, the difference between this and like Another Self-Portrait, for example, is that the songs on Another Self-Portrait improve upon those on the original Self-Portrait. The songs on the best of the cutting edge rarely, if ever, improve upon the initial songs. Likewise, the songs that he cut from the albums, like California, are not better than any of the songs that he chose for those albums. At best, you're getting interesting alternate material, not better new material. For the students among us, this is really, the whole thing is really a must listen. For the value it has from an artistic process perspective, if not being a, super fun, thrilling listen, I would put this in the high B tier. 20. The Bootleg Series Volume 13, Trouble No More, 1979 to 1981. This one covers his gospel years. The fact of the matter with his gospel years is that the live stuff is substantially better than the studio stuff. Even for Slow Train Coming, which I think is a pretty decent studio album, the live takes of those songs almost always improve upon the studio takes. It's especially true for Saved, and pretty true for Shot of Love as well. The live shows they released from 79 are good. The Toronto 1980 live album is fantastic, one of his best live albums. If they had just released the Toronto 1980 live album, I would put that probably in the A tier. That in and of itself is a terrific document, both for the raw energy of the performances. They're incredibly committed performances, but also just there's an additional sort of meta layer that's interesting to think about. It's Bob Dylan committing to material you would never have thought he would have generated or committed to. Like, it's him veering off onto a very strange artistic detour, but doing it with conviction that seems completely authentic, The authenticity to veer in a completely unpredictable direction is fascinating. Whereas the cutting edge is Dylan fleshing out his best material. Trouble No More is Dylan fleshing out pretty good material at best and some material that's not that good at all. It is interesting to hear him sound checking the first couple of songs from the gospel period in 1978. It's not that interesting to hear him fleshing out When He Returns in the studio. And like all the unreleased songs are like not that interesting either. They tend to be more one-dimensional than the best songs from this period. That's the thing that makes really religious music hard to listen to sometimes, is that it's like a foregone conclusion. You already know what the song is going to be about. In the case of Christian music, it's, sort of exalting Jesus or exalting God or something. And it's just finding a new phrase with which to do that. So it's like, there's no mystery. Like, the answer is there before you even begin, so it feels perfunctory. A lot of these songs are kind of like that. To really paint with a broad brush over the studio outtakes, they're kind of not that interesting. The best stuff is the live stuff, and there's some really good live stuff here. For the quality of the live stuff, I would put this just above Real Live in the B tier. Real Live is a pretty decent document of his 80s style. This is a better one. These shows are better. Listen to the live material from this one. If you're really interested, check out the studio stuff, but it's not that interesting. 21. The Bootleg Series Volume 14. More Blood, More Tracks. I think the title came from Bob. I think somebody asked him, what do you think we should call this? He goes, what about More Blood, More Tracks? This one comprises the Blood on the Tracks sessions, both the initial New York sessions where we got mostly acoustic takes, and then the Minnesota sessions where we got more of the full band takes. If you don't know the story here, it's kind of interesting. Dylan recorded Blood on the Tracks initially as basically an acoustic record. If you're familiar with Blood on the Tracks, think about the Shelter from the Storm production context, or Simple Twist of Fate, or You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go. Basically just Dylan and a bass player playing very tender and intimate arrangements of these songs. And he recorded the entire album that way initially. He then brought the first pressing of that album to his brother in Minnesota and played it to him, and his brother was kind of like, yeah, pretty good. Maybe his brother made the suggestion, maybe somebody else did, but it encouraged Bob to get back in the studio in a different production context and re-record some of these songs. And that's why the initial version of Blood on the Tracks has two different production contexts, generally speaking. And just to kind of answer the question that people have asked me and that may be on your mind if you're watching this, I think the initial Blood on the Tracks got it right. I don't think they should have released just the acoustic version of it. Breaking up with somebody has a lot of different emotions in it. Sometimes you're angry, sometimes you're vicious, sometimes you're depressed, Sometimes you're wistful, regretful, sometimes you're appreciative. There are many different emotions when a relationship comes to an end. The multiple production contexts imbue the songs with the different emotions that is representative of a breakup. Had he just released the acoustic takes, it would have been a much more monochromatic, mono-mood, if you will, album, and not as representative of how it feels to break up with somebody. Like, yes, it's devastating. Yes, you're jealous. Yes, you're regretful. You're wondering what could have been. But that's not all you are. That's not all you are. So credit to Dylan's brother for getting it right. What I also think is that track for track, if you just listen to one track at a time, I think you would rarely pick the band track over the acoustic track. There are exceptions to that. Like, I think the band arrangement of Tangled Up in Blue is better. It feels like you're sitting around a family hearth as opposed to like a real fledgling bonfire in the middle of the desert. That's how the acoustic track sounds, and it doesn't have as much to keep you warm. I also think that you could argue that the band Idiot Wind is the more artistically correct take, in that it's an angry song, it's a mean song, it should sound that way. Splitting the atom of a marriage is going to release a lot of chaotic energy, and that's what Idiot Wind sounds like, just letting that chaotic energy wild. The acoustic take of Idiot Wind is an entirely different feeling. It's more like an implosion. Take for take, just Idiot Wind band versus Idiot Wind acoustic. Maybe you could say that the implosion is more resonant on some level. But if you listen to it in the context of Shelter from the Storm and You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome and Buckets of Rain, all of which also express that energy, I don't know that you need that energy repeated again. To zoom out a bit here, it was funny for me because, again, this was a bootleg that I owned years before it was ever released officially, so the official release did not take me by surprise. I knew this stuff already. But to put myself in the mind of somebody who is not familiar with this material, you really should hear this. You really should hear the original takes of these songs. For the urgency with which you must listen to the acoustic takes, and for the sort of the winning one-to-one comparisons of the acoustic takes to the band takes, I would put this in the sort of B+ zone. 22, the Bootleg Series Volume 15, Travelin' Thru 1967 to 1969. Generally speaking, this is the John Wesley Harding and Nashville Skyline years. Some Dylan periods have a lot of great unreleased material in the vaults, like full original songs that never saw the light of day. Blind Willie McTell from the Infidel Sessions being the crown jewel of that. This is not one of them. The stuff that they pulled out of the vaults here is mostly alternate takes, mostly the band sort of hashing stuff out. These sessions were very hasty. Both John Wesley Harding and Nashville Skyline were very hasty. At best, it's like, some sort of alternate melodies, some sort of alternate feels to some of these songs in the studio. Like I Pity the Poor Immigrant has a different feel and melody. Lay Lady Lay has some slight variations in its arrangement, but in general, this is one of the least essential Bootleg Series installments. There's also the session that Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash did together, which for the most part is not that good. If the spectrum of these outtakes is from the complete basement tapes, which is Dylan having fun, to the cutting edge, which is Dylan, fleshing out really great art, this is way more toward the complete basement tapes side of the spectrum. Like, sure, it's kind of fun to listen to two legends kind of hash stuff out in the studio, but they're not really hashing stuff out. They're just kind of running through lots of songs, sort of haphazardly, maybe drunkenly, who knows. Yeah, again, nothing offensive about this, but just not that interesting. I would put it below the basement tapes complete in the C tier. 23, the Bootleg Series Volume 16, Springtime in New York, 1980 to 1985. Yeah, so this covers, roughly Shot of Love through Empire Burlesque. In other words, a period that many consider among the worst in Dylan's entire career. Do I consider it that way? Yes and no. Some of the material written in these years is among the most misguided in his entire career, but there's a lot of really special stuff from these years. This is just Dylan reckoning with getting older, like really aging out of youth into middle age, wrestling in the moment and through new songs with what it's going to be like for him to get older. Is he going to keep trying to sound like a young guy like he does on a lot of Empire Burlesque, or is he going to take a sort of more elder statesman approach like he does on Infidels a little bit? To him, I'm sure in these years it was not clear. Of course, how could it be clear? He was in the moment. As is the case with Trouble No More, the quality of the outtakes is largely tied to the quality of the finished material. Cutting Edge is Dylan's best material. Trouble No More is Dylan's, pretty good, often pretty strange material. This is much more similar to Trouble No More along that spectrum. Just to pick one at random, Seeing the Real You at Last is not that great of a Bob Dylan song. And as fun as it is to play at Cafe Wah, which we did recently, ultimately it's not that great of a song. So hearing an alternate take of it, it's not watching genius gestate. It's watching mediocrity gestate. Sorry, but it is. And so then there's a lot of cases of that here. The 2-disc album here is worth listening to. There is some stuff that's just sort of mind-bogglingly un-Dylan in a cool way. Let's Keep It Between Us would be one of those. Yes Sir, No Sir is like, I don't even know what to call that. It almost feels like ELP or something. I don't know why they didn't include a few other unreleased original songs on the 2-disc version. Like, I don't know why they didn't include Julius and Ethel. I also don't know why they didn't include the take of Joker Man from the Letterman show in 1984. There's some odd curatorial decisions as well. In these leaner years, there's just less to work with. Which isn't to say that Dylan wasn't trying really hard. I mean, he wrote a lot. I mean, there's a lot of original material here. He was writing a lot and writing committedly in these years, but I think he was just at a personal and artistic crossroads that he really didn't know which path he was going to take. Made some experiments that were really ill-advised and misguided. There's a morbid appeal here that's almost like watching a video of a cat fall into a bathtub. You know what I mean? Like seeing it get really close to the edge and then fall in and then just jump right out as if it had never happened. Like that. That's kind of like what these years are like. But you don't want to put your cat through that if you can avoid it. It's not fun for the cat. And in this metaphor, Dylan is the cat and we are his owners. I think it works. I know at this point you're a Dylan student, so listen to the short version once or twice, but don't overdo it. I would put this just above Travelin' Thru in the C tier. 24, the Bootleg Series Volume 17, Fragments, Time Out of Mind Sessions 1996 to 1997. This is the Time Out of Mind years, both in the studio and live. I do like Time Out of Mind. I do not love Time Out of Mind. I think I put it in the low A tier in the tier list, so I'm a fan of it. I've listened to it a lot, but I'm not as big a fan of it as I am of, say, Love and Theft. So the 2022 remix, I was not that interested in, just as I was never that interested in Beatles remixes. I'm like, was that really the issue? Like, was anybody complaining about the mixes of Sgt. Pepper? So that's a whole disc that I kind of just don't care about. The amount that I like and I'm interested by these Bootleg Series installments is driven by how much I like and I'm interested by the official releases that they're based on. So the fact that I like but don't love Time Out of Mind has to do with how I feel about this, but also the fact that they released the best outtakes and alternate takes on Telltale Signs, the Bootleg Series Volume 8, already, reduces the sort of pleasant surprise that this might have otherwise been. There's not that much that's interesting that they haven't already released to warrant this extensive of a collection. However, were I in charge of the Bootleg Series, and maybe I will be someday, I would take more of a Dick's Picks type approach to it, Grateful Dead live album series, meaning I would select concerts from the Neverending Tour from other periods of his career and release those concerts. Have a little fanfare, just a little bit of fanfare around regular releases of Dylan concerts. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Dylan stuff is best when it is live. The studio is helpful, but it is not the sort of full consummation of this material. In particular, the Time Out of Mind stuff. Yes, Daniel Lanois' echoey, swampy, New Orleans-y studio context is helpful, but I would rather listen to the San Jose 98 version of Cold Irons Bound over the studio take any day. And there's a lot of pretty badass versions of Lovesick, too. Even the Grammys performance, release the Grammys performance. I don't know how the copyright works there, but release the Soy Bomb Grammys performance of Lovesick. If you're just coming to this material for the first time, focus on the live stuff, unless you're really a Time Out of Mind fanatic. This is to some extent just my taste. I'm not that interested in a remix of an album that I didn't love to begin with. I think they already got the best outtakes and alternate takes, so that is not that interesting to me. The most interesting stuff here is the live stuff, but it's buried in the deluxe version, and it's in amongst a lot of material that I don't consider that interesting. If it were me, I would take a different approach to the Bootleg Series at this point. He's played some incredible live concerts in the 37 or so years that the Neverending Tour has been going. release those, do those, or release a sort of curated version of those. They're great. There's a lot of very cool live stuff that has never really seen the light of day in the Bootleg series. Do those. Yeah, this is low C tier for me. So there you have it. That's Bob's Shadow Catalog ranked. I get the sense that people are not as hungry for this ranking as the other one, but here it is nonetheless. What's cool about his Shadow Catalog is that there is a lot of material that's good to excellent, that's as good or better than a lot of what he released in his official studio catalog. There's also a lot of material that is interesting and pretty good, if not excellent. Springtime in New York is maybe the best example of that. Like, it's interesting to see him doing that. It's sort of, again, it's morbidly pleasurable to see him doing that, but it's not essential. And maybe what I mean by not essential is it doesn't necessarily deepen one's understanding of Bob Dylan. Like, if you listen to Empire Burlesque, you know that he went in a very perverse production direction for a little while. You know that he was trying to write as if he were a younger, cooler man than he was. You know that. Hearing him do that more on Springtime in New York doesn't necessarily deepen your understanding of him. Whereas the Bootleg Series Volume 5, the live 1975 album, really does. It really deepens your understanding of him. There is some horrendous material, but even Dylan and the Dead and Budokan have some redeeming qualities that keep them out of the much feared F tier. Yeah, so if you've got a preference between other artists and more of Bob Dylan's songs or something else, let me know. Of course, as always, please like this video and subscribe to my page, and I will see you next time.